How's everybody doing today? We doing good? We're going to pray for Barbara and some healing. That's a rough one, but I'm glad to see everybody's faces. All you on Zoom land, what's up, everybody? What's up? So I'm excited to share with you guys some updates and then get us started in this series called Not a Checklist, where we're going to be talking about spiritual disciplines. So I want to get started with some updates. So I don't know if you guys have seen an aerial view of South Hayward Parish, but for those of you on Zoom, I'm looking at the left-hand side of this picture, like where that red vehicle is parked along the street there. This used to just be some open dirt and weeds, and then it would turn into dirt, and then it would be weeds, and then then there was a season of dirt and a season of weeds, right? And then there was some dirt. So basically this land was undeveloped. And our own Dan Johansson got an idea. He got a bug in his saddle. Anybody know Dan Johansson? I think he's been here before. That's right, Dan, they're clapping for you, brother. He got this idea. He said, what if we were to do something with that dirt? And I was like, okay. So we looked around, got some ideas. He's full of those ideas. He got a friend. And they went and they planted this. Let's take a look here on this next slide. So he got some youth from our youth internship program, some volunteers, some folks who had some time in shelter, and he turned that dirt into something special. He took that torn up plot of weeds and he made it into an actual, not just any kind of garden, but an actual food production garden. So this guy right here, this guy right here, on this next slide, I want to introduce you to him. His name is David S. And he's been a part of this since the beginning. He saw it happening. He jumped in. And what's cool is because he's there daily checking in on it, there's a bunch of volunteers, a bunch of people here from the church who have been a part of that. Thank you to everybody who's done that. They've been able to give out over 150 pounds of food that was grown in that empty plot of dirt in the first season. Isn't that crazy? Look at how God did that. And David S., this guy right here, he's been helping since the beginning. We're going to talk a little bit about him. He retired from doing landscaping, so he was, of course he's got opinions on everything that we're doing, right? So Dan gave him the code to the garden. There's a little lock on there, gave him the code, and this guy spends a lot of time in there, pruning, planting. He found all these little extra containers that we use, like we give stuff out. He'll take the containers after he drinks his coffee, puts the dirt in there, plants little seeds, got little sprouts, and is growing all these different things. Now that flower on the left, it's not actually right there. I'm not a graphic designer. I'm sorry, y'all. I just put that flower right there. But that flower is actually right next to the South Hayward Parish building. And if anybody here has ever been inside the building, you know that there were some spots where weeds were growing about this high next to the building. Well, David got in there, took out the weeds, and a few months ago he planted that bulb. And now there's new life. But not just new life like in the plant, but there's also new life in David. Because David stays in our shelter. And David has been working in the garden, and David has, he told me, he pulled me aside on Sunday, because we do Stack Life over there, and he goes, Aaron, come here. You like my plant? Yes, sir, I will take a picture of your plant, and I will tell people about it. I was like, is it all right if I tell people? He's like, that's why I pointed it out. Yes, sir. David wanted y'all to know about his plant. So if you guys want to go over there and take a look at it, David and many others are working together on that garden. And I believe there's about 8 rows of garden beds that they put in there. There's also a raised bed that they put in there for people that have different abilities, so that you don't have to bend all the way down to the ground. So they're making it raised beds that are about, yay high. So they're trying to make it to a place that's actually like bringing community together. And it's already starting right there with David Life. So, man, what a victory. I'm so excited about that. Next thing is Stack Life. And you guys might be aware of, the root reason why I came here was actually to start a church out of our homeless shelter at South Hayward Parish. We started back in October 2020. I was just trying to find some fact-finding. So I came in the breakfast time in the morning. They get breakfast about 6 o'clock in the morning. I would come, I would hang out, and we would sit around and we would just talk. People are free to go, do whatever they want. They could sit down and talk with us. So we started with just having circle time. Had a bunch of ideas. rolled out some things. Some things didn't work. So I learned some new things. But what happened was that shelter closed in June of last year. So in June of last year, we decided to move it to the afternoons. What's cool in the afternoons is that we started to build some community. So you can see in some of these photos, on that top right, that's us at the Weeks Park, which is across the street, just going around, hanging out, talking with people, giving food. So we started out there in the afternoons just giving out food in the park because people didn't know about us, right? We were always closed on Sundays. Below that is a different day, us hanging out at the park. And then on that top left-hand side is actually some of our volunteers and some of our guests from the shelter hanging out. We were doing a birthday celebration for one of them because, what do you do with family? What do you do with community? You celebrate, right? So we're hanging out, having some birthday parties. And that bottom left is our faith circle. So that's really what church looks like as Stack Life. We get together each week, so we offer showers, we have food, and then after all that's done, those that want to hang out, we hang out and we sit down and we talk about our faith. We work through different steps of recovery, we work through different steps of the Bible, and what I've really realized, there's some deep things that I've learned from these folks. And in this next slide, I want to show you some of those. In this circle time, one of the things I've realized is that a lot of our guests in the shelter have not had an opportunity to mourn those that they've lost. So what you're looking at here is actually a memorial service. We held a memorial service, and it was a generic memorial service. One of the things we did, we actually lost somebody last year, and we went to have a memorial service for that individual in the shelter. And the wild thing is that most people didn't know that individual personally. So a week later, a lot of people didn't know them. But they did have somebody that they needed to mourn in their lives. So we had a generic memorial service. We actually are getting ready to have one coming up this week here at First Pres. We'll be having one during the week. If you want to get involved in that, just let me know. But one of the things we started to do as a tradition, one of our staff, Sandy, she put together this shadow box on the right-hand side, and she painted that. So that was a blank shadow box. She painted that whole thing by herself. And it says, "Always remembered you were here." And what we do in our memorial service, one of our practices is become giving people something to write with, and they just write something, a message to the person that they've lost. And it's a way for them to go through the mourning process, the grieving process, for us all to work through that grief that if we don't let go of that stuff, it really eats us up, yeah? So a couple things that we've learned is spiritually our folks in the shelter and streets feel disconnected from their God. We're all in recovery from something is another lesson that I've learned. It doesn't necessarily need to be substance abuse. We're all in recovery from something. It's a truth that every conversation I've had becomes real every single time. And then the next thing is that we need to start from the beginning each week. It's been a huge lesson for me is that we just start from the beginning. And you're asking, like, what is this beginning we're talking about? Well, thank you for asking, Bob. I appreciate that. We're going to dive into this week, the beginning of our spiritual disciplines. But before we dive into that, I want to ask a question. Why do we have spiritual disciplines? Is it so that we can earn our spot in heaven? No. Everybody says no. Is it so that we can look good to others? No. Right? It's not about those external things. Really, what we've been digging into is that the real reason that we have these spiritual disciplines is so that we can build a relationship with God. Right? So relationships, rather than a checklist, right? Relationships don't require a checklist. Relationships require work. So that's what we're going to talk about in this whole summer series. We're pretty excited about it. We spent some time this last week as executive team like digging deep into it and just talking about what that's going to look like for us. And each one of us are kind of excited to share some of the things we've been working on. But what I'm going to start in today is learning how to start to build those personal relationships and the way that we can do that with our God. So let me pick up where I left off last week. I scratched the surface on some of the relationship problems that I have with my family. You guys remember me talking about my daughter and some of those issues, right, in that panel? Anybody else had any family issues ever? No? Just me? Okay, whew. Feeling a little lonely and sweaty up here. Okay. Well, a major turning point in the life between my daughter and I happened when she turned 15. To that point, she was a typical daddy's girl, right? As a young father, I taught her everything she should fear, she should avoid, she should stay away from, the things she should never do, the people she should never be around, right? I taught her the checklist. You guys know what I'm talking about? The daughter checklist, right? Do this, do this, don't do that, and don't be around the people that do, right? You guys know that checklist. Well, all of a sudden, we went from this time where I was telling her everything and she just listened, and then everything was perfect, right? Wrong. That's not what happened. She no longer wanted my direction. She no longer wanted my caution, my guidance, or my judgment on her life, to be honest. But what happened? Like, wasn't I being a good father? Wasn't I doing the right thing and teaching her how to avoid pain, to stay away from life's pitfalls, for not doing the things that I did in my life that hurt myself and hurt other people? I mean, of course I was a good father. Of course I loved her. But that wasn't the problem. Was she just being a bad daughter? Was she being rebellious? Was she going the wrong direction? Anybody ever heard that one, right? Or felt that one, right? When you're talking about a family member? Oh, they're going down the wrong path, right? That wasn't the problem. Let me tell you what I realized was the problem. It wasn't about her being a bad girl or me being a bad dad. Okay, indulge me real quick. So I lift weights sometimes. And let's just say I was going to go to the gym over here up the street, and I was going to squat. You guys know about squatting? Okay? I'm going to put, let's just be honest, maybe 225 on there. That's about as high as I can go. I should be able to do more, but my neck and my back. All right, anyway, so let's say I'm getting under the squat bar, right? And I put the bar right here, and I get up underneath it like this. How do you guys think it's going to go? Ouch? Yeah, that's exactly how that would go. Do you guys think the problem is that I'm not strong? Do you think the problem is that I can't lift that weight? Do you think, maybe. Well, thank you, Mark Buckaloo. I appreciate that. There was a maybe in the crowd for you guys on Zoom, and everybody who's muted, they probably said some things too. But it's not. I know, I promise you, I've got witnesses in this room that I can lift more than that. But it's not even a problem of mindset. The problem is my posture. You guys following me? So if we're to start at the very beginning of a lift in the weight room, we've got to start with our posture. And that, my friends, was the problem with my relationship with my daughter. It was my posture. I was taking the posture of her judge, her jury, and executioner all in one because I'm dad, right? I know what's best for her. I know I have all the fear in my life that she'll make some mistakes. But what happened when she was 15 is she turned to that point in her life where she was becoming an adult and she really needed to work on her own independence. And guess what was in the way of her independence? Me. Me and my pride, my arrogance, my desire to control, to look like a good father to other people, to live my life through her success. Well, hold on, that's a different sermon. We won't get into that one real quick. But it's true. The issue with my daughter translated to all the relationships in my life, to my wife, to my other children, to my work, to that guy who tailgates me on the freeway. And the most important relationship in my life also, relationship with my God. What I've come to realize at the beginning of establishing and growing and deepening and furthering a relationship in my life is fixing my posture. Well, in the verse today, we read from 1 Peter, verse 5. It says, God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong, firm, and steadfast. I used to think that the lion, the prowling like a lion, was getting me to create some big sin. But I'll tell you guys, most of the time, that lion is prowling around and it's getting me to take the wrong posture. In my relationship with God, with my friends, my family, my work. So where does it all start? Well, the beginning of spiritual connection is a brand new concept, and it is called humility. Brand new, right? New to the world. In Proverbs 1, which is what they call the book of wisdom, it tells us that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The Hebrew word here for fear is not like afraid. It's the word yirah. But it's more like reverence. It's not fear like, oh, I'm afraid. It's more like respect. Also in that 1 Peter 5 verse, the Greek equivalent is tapainoo, which means one's soul bringing down one's pride. To have a modest opinion of oneself, to behave in an unassuming manner, devoid of all haughtiness. I personally struggle in this area sometimes. I don't know if I'm the only one in the room. This family may not be what we wanted to hear today as far as spiritual discipline. We might have wanted to hear a step that we can take each morning to make us good for the whole day, right? Like that one box we can check off, or maybe a podcast or a book we can read, right? But God tells us clearly that the way to know God intimately and directly is through humility. You might have heard me share about the 12 steps in the past. And these 12 steps really personally sum up like my spiritual disciplines. I think most of my spiritual disciplines are found in those 12 steps. But indulge me with a quick history veer off real quick. I don't know if you guys know, but AA didn't actually develop the 12 steps on their own. They actually borrowed those and grew them from a group that was actually a Bible-based Christian group called the Oxford Group. And they started with 6 steps. And the first one is a complete deflation. A complete deflation. Second is a dependence on God. 3, a moral inventory. 4, confession. 5, restitution. And 6, continued work with others in need. But the first step of the Oxford Group, also from the book of Proverbs, also from the book of Peter, is a complete deflation. Let's hone in on that first step. So, a complete deflation, it's spelled out in AA or in all 12 steps. They read it as, we admitted that we were powerless over blank, that our lives have become unmanageable, right? And you can fill in that blank with whatever this situation is. In that situation where I was dealing with my daughter, I realized I am powerless over my daughter. Still true today, in case you were wondering. All of these references and all of our lives, we can point to the truth that the beginning of knowledge of God is to recognize that we are not God. We all know logically that concept, right? We get it, right? We know, okay, I'm not God, there's a higher power more than me. But why is it a struggle for us? Why is it a struggle for us? Why do we jump into that seat of judge, jury, and executioner? Well, in this book, A Spiritual Kindergarten, I'd love to show it to anybody if you guys would like to take a look at it. This has been a very helpful for me book. And also here in the shelter, we use it for our circles. We learn a couple reasons why. A, we struggle with this because we believe in the false belief that we don't need help. If we believe that we don't need help, then we sit into that judge's seat, we put on the robe, and we get the gavel, right? We also believe that being powerless makes us incompetent. So it's a lie that we tell ourselves, but it's not true. Being powerless just simply means that our own willpower alone is not enough to create lifelong change in our lives. We can't just will that lifelong change. And because we believe in willpower, and we think that that's all it is, we live a life of sadness, right, and shame, because we're constantly blaming ourselves that we couldn't do that thing that we wanted to do forever, and we couldn't stop the thing that we didn't want to do. It's probably one of the most simple steps that we can do, but it's going to be difficult. It's one word that we can take to actually begin this step of humility. And the word is admit. Today's spiritual discipline is admitting. Admitting that we're powerless over blank and that our life has become unmanageable. Admitting that you and I can't control blank, whatever that is in your life. And it makes it to where our lives are unmanageable for a certain element. Right? I would fill in that blank for any area in my life that I keep kind of trying to control, and I try to do the thing I want to do, and I try to stop doing the thing I don't want to do, but when I finally admit, that's the proper posture. Like I said before, I'm powerless over my daughter. I'm powerless over my wife, my other children, my job, my weight gain and my weight loss, my pay, my life as a whole. The only way to true, deep relationship with all of these areas is to admit powerlessness. So after a year, back to my daughter, of consistent, brutal, and painful conflict with her, I finally laid down the sword. And I went and admitted to her that I just love her. That I just want her to be happy. That I want her to be able to make her own decisions. That I want her to be independent and live the life that God designed her to live, not the one that I wanted her to live. I wanted her to be able to live freely and to be a self-actualized and adult. And I wanted her to love me, if I'm really honest. And by admitting those things, it really opened up the door for that love to grow. Slowly, we began to rebuild our relationship. And daily, I had to admit that I could not control her. It's a daily thing. It wasn't just because I said that one time, it all got better, right? It opened up the door, but then daily I had to go back. I had to have this spiritual discipline of admitting to my daughter. Same thing with my relationship with my wife, same thing with my children, same thing with my job, same thing with all of you. And most importantly, again, same thing with my God. Just a little side note, fam, control isn't really love. Control isn't love. 6 years later, I admit that I'm constantly having to go back to do this again, every single day. She's 22 now, about to graduate from college, and I still got to go back and I got to do that same thing every single day. But when I find myself there, I have to go back to the beginning of the relationship building piece, and I have to admit that I'm powerless over whatever that thing is, whatever. That thing that I'm trying to control in my life, that thing that's become unmanageable for me. So I'm going to ask worship team come down just a quick second. And we're going to start to put this into practice today. I was reading a book that Paul recommended called Liturgy of the Ordinary. I would suggest it for you. I mean, there's beautiful chapters in there. Like one is making tea. And it talks about how that's liturgy. One is arguing with my spouse. That's an interesting liturgy chapter. But there's a lot in there how God shows up. And one of the chapters, it actually had a step in there, and it said, what are some ways that you can make peace with other people? So it prompted me this past week, because I've been doing some of this work, I was hoping that maybe I had made some growth with my family, right? So I reached out, and I sent a text message, and I asked each one of them individually, what can I do to live at more peace in life with you? And I want to share some encouragement with y'all. 6 years later, where my daughter didn't want to be in the same room with me, and my other kids were probably the same, they were just younger and weren't ready to confront me yet. 6 years later, these are the text messages I received this week. We'll go back one slide. We're not there yet. I said, how can I live more peacefully with you? One said, I would say maybe being more patient when I handle situations differently than you. That's a powerful reflection. And for me, it's encouraging that she was willing to tell me that, right? She felt that we were safe enough in our relationship to be able to say that to me. Another one was, I just feel like sometimes when I try to reason with you or explain mine or someone else's perspective, you just walk out or shut me out, since that's not what you originally thought mattered. So, maybe if you could take the time to hear others' perspectives out or just listen, that would be helpful. How powerful is that feedback, fam? How powerful is that feedback? That's a gift to me on being able to work on my relationship. And I'll tell you right now, 6 years ago, that text message would have said, nothing, we're fine. And finally, my daughter, the one I've been talking about, this is her response. Let's go on a date. I got a prayer up here on the screen. That's a way for us to start this. It's a step for you to take. And it can just be words or it can be physical. I would say when we embody things, it really matters. So would you pray with me? Dear God, I don't seem to be able to manage my life. I want to change, but I can't seem to do it. The things I think will help do not help. Trying harder has not helped. Blaming others has not helped. Trying to control myself or others has not helped. I'm tired of this. I can't do it. I don't know what else to say. Amen.